Afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Anwar Najor-Durak. I am the Assistant Dean for Student Affairs here in the School of Social Work, and I was asked to do this 1-hour presentation on limited licensing process as part of Professional Development Week. And I'll just take a second here to thank our advisors, Naila Burks, Jeffrey Jones, and Lawrence Robinson, who have worked diligently these past few months, and particularly to prepare for this week's professional development series that includes this session as well as sessions tomorrow and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday. In fact, they have agencies that they contacted who will do job talks. The two that I can remember offhand are DHHS and DMC, Detroit Receiving. Perhaps at the end, one of them will share any more details, but just keep that in mind. You can sign up for those and listen in and get more information. And so with that, I'm going to share my screen so I can use this PowerPoint, and I'd like to just spend today's session to really focus on, let's see. Okay, can folks see the PowerPoint? Yes?
No.
Oh,
No.
Okay.
No.
okay, hang on, please. Let's see. Why isn't it doing that? Aha. Okay. Screen one. I want screen one. How about this? Yes.
There it is.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
All right, very good. So I'll go ahead and do this because I think it's easier for you to see it this way. Is that better?
Yes.
All right, very good. All right. So I really want to today focus on the application process. I know there are some questions about the exam. I'm going to talk about taking it because there are some new laws that are taking effect July 1st of this year. But this session isn't really to talk about the exam content. We'll do other things that focus on that. Today is really focus on especially those students that are graduating and want to make sure that they hit the ground running when they graduate and have this license. So what are the things that you can do now as you prepare for that? So there, I'm going to talk about that. And of course, to get licensed, you need to demonstrate education. You have to have experience and examination. And of course, there are always fees. You can never get away from those. So, but from this, I really, again, want to look at Llbsw and Llmsw. I don't know. I suspect there's probably more of you that are MSWs that are graduating with an MSW, but I'll talk about both. And then I think it would be easier if you let me go through and then please jot your questions down, and then we'll open it up for Q&A so that we can get through some of this information and then have discussion and answer questions. So I'll just say that in Michigan, right, and of course this is focusing on Michigan. There may be some of you that may be opting to move out. I can answer some of those questions, but this process is focused on licensure in the state of Michigan. And I can answer questions outside of that. But the health professional licenses in the state of Michigan are regulated by the Licensing and Regulatory Affairs of the state of Michigan. It is a privilege that you have to be eligible for. It's not something that is given. Requires that we work and are responsible to the public that we serve. And in the law that's written around licensure, it talks about good moral character. And as you can see, this is what good moral character is. That we ensure that we serve the public that we serve in a fair, honest, and open manner. To give you an idea of licensure, I looked on the website this past weekend, and so our license is under the health code license. There's also an occupational code license. And as you can see, I listed the licenses that are offered under each one of those codes. And you'll see that the grand total as of February 1st was under 500,000. So there's 476,276 licenses for the health code. And then as you can see, 217, 517 licenses under the occupational code. So, and then I think I have the social work ones. Yeah. So here are the counts for social work as of March 1st, according to Lara. So folks who have a full license are the highest. There's about over 18,000 LMSWs. There are over 6,000 limited license master social workers, a little over 3,000 bachelors, as you can see, 1377 limited bachelors, and then the technicians and the military temp, as you can see, there's one. So the total is just under 30,000 of us that are licensed in the state of Michigan, just to kind of give you an idea. I always include this because I think it's really important. In the social work program, many of you are familiar with the code of, or the ethics code, right? The NASW code of ethics. And then many of us don't realize there is the public health code. The public health code is a law that regulates how we are to practice in the state of Michigan, and we're bound by that law. And in that law, there is a statement that says when you practice social work, you have to practice it in accordance and consistent with your code of ethics. And our code of ethics, usually we refer to the NASW code of ethics. So if someone practices social work and doesn't abide by the public health code, they can be sanctioned. And if you practice social work without keeping in mind your ethical obligations, that can get you in trouble. So you want to make sure that you're familiar with that. I'm again going to focus on licensing and regulatory affairs through, and often you'll hear people say LARA, right? LARA is licensing and regulatory affairs. And it's that website that I use for much of the information I'm sharing with you today. I used to be on the board of social work, so a lot of the information comes from my experience on that board relative to licensing and certainly public health code and issues that may come up from social workers who are practicing in Michigan. So obviously, we need to be licensed so that we provide consumers that we work with that we are qualified and that there's a opportunity for enforcing licensure for the good of the public. And that's why it's important to be licensed. So when you apply for your license, you have to disclose certain things, right? And these are some things that you have to disclose it. And if you have a felony conviction, if you have a misdemeanor, if you've ever been licensed somewhere else and lost privileges, if you lost a license, if you have a criminal background check, there is one required. I'll talk more about that. Or if you have any of these personal disqualifications. So when you apply for your license, you're asked questions, and those questions often relate to these areas, and you have to respond to those when you apply for a license. All right. So actually I have this, I'm going to skip that. In Michigan, there's title protection, which means you cannot call yourself a social worker in Michigan unless you're licensed, and really is considered if someone says they're a social worker and uses that title but is not licensed, they can be sanctioned. It's actually a felony to say you're a social worker, to use that title without licensure. It's also illegal to practice social work if you're not licensed. So if you're out there and someone says he or she is providing social work services, or he or she is saying she's a social worker or he's a social worker, and they're not licensed, they can be sanctioned for that. So it's important to be mindful of that. So, and the term social work has the protection, and the tasks that you perform as a social worker are defined in the public health code. Obviously, I wasn't going to go over that today, but they are very specific, and some of them are specific to LMSW versus LLMSW or Llbsw. So there are some things you can do at all levels, and other things that you can do only in certain, like if you are a macro social work or if you're a clinical social work, some of those are specific to those levels of licenses. And so you can take a look at that in the public health code. Our licensing rules and law did change in 2005. We used to have a registration process, and then we moved to a licensing process effective July 1st, 2005. So even though it's not that long ago, we were one of the last states that moved to licensure. So when you when you first graduate with your bachelor's, excuse me, either with your BSW or MSW, you begin practicing on a limited license level. So you apply for a Llbsw or an LLMSW. And then once you meet the requirements for the full license, you move to an LMSW, and that has two designations. You would indicate when you move from limited to full license, whether you're moving to a clinical or macro. You can't do both at once. You can always add a second one. At the bachelor's level, there is no designation because it's a generalist, right? So you move from Llbsw to an Llbsw to move from a limited to a full license. So kind of keep that in mind. So in order to move from limited to full, and I'll just go through this quickly, and then I'll spend the rest of the time talking about the application process. To move from limited to full, you have to have 4,000 hours of supervised experience. That supervision has to be from someone who's fully licensed. So that comes out to 2,000 hours per year. You can't, I had someone say to me, I work 2 full-time jobs. Can I get my 4,000 hours in a year? And the law is very clear. You can't move from limited to a full in less than 2 years. So 2 years is the minimum time that you are given to get your 4,000 hours to move from limited to full license. That's 40 hours a week. And I'll talk more about the limited license, but the supervision is 4 hours a month. It can be a combination of group or individual sessions. At least 1 hour has to be an individualized review of the work that you do. And then 50% of the supervision can include individual contact with active work functions for the applicant. These are some things you don't necessarily have to think about right now, but it's good to be mindful of them. When you first graduate, what you're eligible for is a limited license, and that is only awarded one time each year. So you have to renew it every year, while a full license is good for 3 years. It's really important. I'm going to say this now and I'll repeat it again. Do not apply for a limited license unless your intention is to work. If you're going to get a limited license and then you decide you're not going to work, and you're for whatever reason that might be, you're kind of wasting that, in the sense that if you go, this has happened where someone got their limited license, they renewed the first year, and then they stopped working, and then they kept renewing but weren't working, because once you renew 6 times, if you haven't met the requirements to move from limited to full license, you're going to be in a pickle, because the state of Lara does not allow you to renew more than 6 times. So the renewal should only be happening if you are accruing hours to get to that 4,000 hours you need to move from limited to full license. If you decide that you're going to start a family, or you're just not going to work, then hold off and only apply for your limited license when you know for sure you're going to be working and accruing hours. All right, I'll say more about that at some point as well. Once you get your full license, that's valid for 3 years. But remember, the limited is only good for a year. And the CE issues, the CE is not required for the limited license. It's only required for the full license. Once you get your full license, you have to have 45 continuing education hours that are approved by the board. And as you can see, 5 in ethics, 2 in pain, and 1 in human trafficking. Those, again, only when you have your full license, are not required. The idea being that when you have a limited license, you are meeting with a supervisor weekly. And so you're addressing your needs during that supervision, and making sure that you're up to speed, if you will, and up to date on current best practices. And it's a time for you to prepare for the license, because you're not going to be able to take typically after this year. I'll talk more about that in a minute. And when people apply for a full license, they can be audited to determine if you've actually taken those CE. So it's always a good idea, once you start doing CE, when you have your full license, to keep track of your CE certificates in the event you're audited, so that you can present those to the state that demonstrate that you have the 45 for the 3-year cycle, again, once you have that. All right, so licensing in Michigan for new graduates. We can share this PowerPoint with folks if they want. This is the website you go to it's the link to the actual application. And this application is for LBSW, LMSW, LLBSW, LLMSW. So you just check which one you're applying for. In order for you to apply for this, you simply submit an application. There's a fee. I think it's $43. I have that on the next slide. And then you fill out the form so that you do your background check. So you can actually submit your application right now. Those of you that are graduating in May can go ahead and fill out the application. In fact, I'm going to suggest that you do that. You submit your application right now. You send it to the state with your fee. The state is going to give you the go ahead to do your background check, and you can go ahead and do that all right now as well. The one thing you won't be able to do is to have a degree posted transcript sent from Wayne State to Lara, because you don't have that yet. You won't have that until May. Because your grades won't be in until late April. Your advisors are going to have to certify your degree, and the registrar's office has to stamp your transcript to show that you have the degree. You don't want to send a transcript to Lara that doesn't have your degree posted on it, because you'll have to resend it again. So make sure you don't send your transcript to Lara until you know for certain that your degree is posted, and you can tell when you go in Academica to make sure that your degree is posted on there. The criminal background check doesn't, you can just, as soon as the state says your application is in process, we need your background check, you can go ahead and do that. And then the only thing that we'll be waiting for is the transcript, as I said. And here it also has this is the link again to the application. If any of you have been licensed, and it probably won't be, if you had a license and you're renewing it, that's a different application. So this application is for new applications, and the cost is $43.20 for the initial Llbsw or LMSW. Again, in red, reminding people, I met with an alum who said to me, I didn't know that, and I've been applying, and now they're telling me I can't apply anymore. So again, you only apply for your limited license if your intention is to begin working and accruing hours to move from limited to full license. All right, so what is this thing about the June 30th, 2021 deadline date? Some of you may or may not know that, well, I need to back up 1 second. When you apply for your limited license, you're applying to get the license, and then in order to move from limited to full license, not only do you have to have your hours, your supervised hours, you also have to demonstrate that you've taken and passed the ASWB exam. The ASWB stands for Association of Social Work Boards. This is an independent entity that has created an exam that states opt in to take. And so Michigan is actually all the states that I'm in the United States opt in. And so when you have your limited license in Michigan, you can request of Michigan to give you permission to take this license. They send your name to ASWB, and then ASWB says, we got permission from the state of Michigan. You can now go ahead and schedule a time to take the exam. You cannot call and get the permission to take the exam until the state of Michigan gives you permission. And they'll only do that if you have a limited license in place. So, and prior to June 30th of 2021, anybody who had a limited license could go ahead and register to take the exam. ASWB, when they first created this exam, their intention was not to have folks come out of school to take this exam. They told the state of Michigan, our intention was always to have people take the exam after they've completed their 4,000 hours of experience that is supervised. And we want you to change your policy to be consistent with our request, because that's how we meant our exam to be created. We want people not to take the exam when they graduate, but rather wait until they have their 4,000 hours supervision, and they'll be in a better position then to take our exam. So Michigan said, okay, we're going to comply now with ASWB. And they were going to do this last year, but there was a big uproar. And so they decided that they would plan it out. And they said, okay, starting July 1st, anyone who doesn't have a Llbsw will not be able to request to take the exam until they have their 4,000 hours. So that means that for those of you that really want to take this exam sooner than 2 years post-degree experience, if your intention is to want to take it sooner than that, then your Llmsw, your limited license master social worker, has to be issued before or by June 30th of 2021. So so that's why I said, go ahead and submit your application now, do your background check, pay the fee. The only other thing you'll have to do is wait until your degree posted transcript is done, and then you can request that that be sent. So if that gets done by May, early or even like early May, let's say that happens, right? So you want to make sure all your grades are in and you've done all your assignments, so there's no incompletes. All that stuff becomes important. The state of Michigan has said to me they will do their best to process applications if everything is in, and once they get their degree posted transcript from the state, from Wayne State University, they'll issue the license. So once you have something from Laura saying your Llmsw is issued, you then can go ahead and register to take the exam at any time. You do not have to register to take the exam before June 30th. You can do it anytime after that. The key is to have the Llmsw issued by June 30th. I think there was a communication that went out, or I've gotten requests from students saying, I was told I have to register for the exam before June 30th, and that's not the case. Once you have your Llmsw issued to you, you then have the door open to register for the exam at any time. So I want to stop at this point and see if there are questions, because the rest of my slides are about the exam and I don't necessarily want to spend time talking about that. We can do that in a separate session.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Is Wayne State going to guarantee that they can send our transcripts by that time for us?
So there are a lot of different things that we don't have control over, right? So we can't guarantee that a transcript will be sent if a student has outstanding grades, right? And so there are lots of those kinds of things that we can't control. I can tell you that our staff and our advisors in particular have been working all year knowing this is going to come up. So we are there. They have already assessed your plans of work to make sure many of you have been reached out to by advisors saying, hey, I saw this. And so if there, what Lawrence and Robinson, Naila, Burks, and Jeffrey will be doing towards the end of April and most of May is certifying degrees. Once they're certified, you are the ones who have to request from the registrar's office, from records office, excuse me, to have the transcript sent. So what we will do, and I will do this too, and I have a note to contact records office and remind them that this is happening this year, that many folks want that. So we're going to really advocate for you to make sure that Wayne State will process those as quickly as they possibly can. But there's no way that I can guarantee, just because there are so many things that are outside of our ability to control, to promise that. But we will do everything we possibly can.
And then, thank you. And then you're saying that as soon as we get our certification, that our degree's been certified, that's when we request it?
Correct, because you don't want, the state will only accept degree posted transcript to process your application for the Llbsw or Llmsw.
Thank you.
Yep. I might add here, it's not, and you're getting my opinion here. Let me share that. And that is that there is nothing that really is pushing you to have to pass this exam this early. Because remember, even if you pass the exam, you can't get the full license. You have to have those 4,000 hours of experience supervised by an Llmsw before you can request to move from limited to full license. And folks who are at the Association of Social Work Boards feel strongly that they say that that particular exam, the master's exam, the clinical and the advanced generalist exams, excuse me, are designed to really benefit students' practice wisdom that you accrue during those 4,000 hours that you're gaining in those 2 years. And remember, you know, though you're not required to do CE over those 4,000 hours, you are strongly encouraged to stay on top of things. So during your supervision, those 2 years ought to be spent making sure that you understand the exam, that you are really preparing for it, right? So be involved in all kinds of activities that will help you to appreciate what that exam is like. And in your supervision, you can address that and prepare for it and take practice exams, so that when you have your 4,000 hours, you're going to be at a place where you will maximize the possibility that you'll pass that exam after those 4,000 hours. Other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm just trying to make sure I understood. So you said that the limited license, it only lasts for a year?
Right. You renew it once a year, and you're allowed to renew it up to 6 times.
Okay, so once you renew it, everything like your hours and everything carries over?
Absolutely. That's a good question, Bianca, because if you, let's say you apply for your limited license this year and you work, say you work for a year, and this, I had a student one year who said, I'm going to move to a different country and I'm not going to be doing social work. And so I said, fine, then don't let it lapse after that first year, don't renew it. And then she came back after a couple of years, and then she applied for her limited license. So those hours she had during the first year absolutely count. And then she did another year and a half until she got her 4,000 hours. And then she applied for her full license and took the exam.
Okay, got it.
Yep. Yep. Good question. Others?
Hey, Anwar, I just wanted to kind of go back over the process for those who want to take the exam early.
Sure.
So after they complete the application, they get their fingerprinted. Then their next step is to, of course, complete their classes and graduate. Then they're waiting on the WSU to upload their transcripts to the website. From there, they need to send their transcripts to Laura to complete the limited licensure process.
Right.
And then Laura will confirm that they have received the limited licensure within a certain amount of time. Then they're eligible to, once they receive the limited licensure, they are eligible to go to the ASWB website to register for the exam.
Well, so yes, I want to clarify something. So when folks apply for their limited license, and I'm going to strongly recommend that those of you that want to maximize time to apply for the limited license now, fill out the application, pay the $43.60 or whatever it is, pay that fee and send it to Lara, do your background check, right? So, and then as Lauren said, once you know that your degree has your MSW degree posted on it, once that degree is posted on your transcript, send that transcript to Lara. Before you can contact ASWB to take the exam, you have to contact Lara and say, now that I have my LLMSW, and of course that has to be issued by the 30th of June, 2021, this year, you ask Lara to give you permission, say to them, I want to take my ASWB exam. And you have to indicate whether you want to take the clinical or the advanced generalist, depending on which you want to, which LMSW designation you're applying for. And then remember that this Lara informs ASWB that you have been given permission, and you get something, right, Lauren? You did this. What do you get from Lara telling you?
So what my process was, I had to go to the ASWB website and register on there, and I believe they communicated with Lara to get permission. They just they made sure that my degree was certified and that I had my limited license. And then I was able to get an email saying that I was eligible to take the exam and
Okay.
schedule some dates.
Good. That's easier because, and what ASWB is doing is making sure that you actually were issued the Llmsw. Once they get okay, then they'll go ahead and give you permission, and then you can find a vendor in an area that's close to you to take the exam.
So I'm going to post that link, and I'm going to post the link in the chat.
Or there's a question in the chat as well. It says from Carrie, after you have your license and you are required to complete your 45 CEUs, you have to complete them within a 3-year period before you renew your license.
Correct. So as was stated, remember, as a limited license, you do not have to do CE, but once you get your full license, you will have to do the 45 CE. And as I said earlier, you want to make sure that you keep track of those. So whenever you go to a CE program, you get a certificate, either start a hard file or an electronic folder. And anytime you get a certificate, put it in that folder. It, trust me, you will thank yourself for doing that, because in the event you are audited, you will need those, so you're not running around trying to find them, and you can just send those to Lara. Say, here is a copy of my certificates of attendance showing that I have the 45 CE, because if you are audited and you can't find those, you can be sanctioned for not having the CE. So you want to make sure that you keep track of those. Again, those are not needed for the limited license. I'm going to recommend that you be mindful about the supervisor that you end up. I mean, sometimes you may not have a choice, but if you have a choice to select a supervisor, be mindful of how you select that person. That person is going to be your guide, and that person is going to help you to prepare to get your full license. And remember, when you apply for your full license, that person has to fill out a form. So if you are asking someone to be a supervisor, remind them at the beginning to say, once I have completed the 4,000 hours, you're going to have to fill out the supervisor form. And I want to make sure you're okay with that. In fact, send them a link to that form and say, will you, so what you don't want to happen is after your 2 years, that person says, I'm not comfortable filling out this form, right? The other thing to remember is that you might say you start working at agency A and you work there for a year, and then you move to agency B, and then you have a different supervisor. So when you leave agency A, have them fill out that form. Even though you don't have your 4,000 hours, you don't want to be chasing that person a year later when you're at the new agency trying to say, hey, I'm applying for my full license. You supervised me 2 years ago and I need you to fill out this form, especially if they moved, right? I had a situation where a former student contacted me and said, the person that supervised me passed away, unfortunately, and what should I do? I mean, that's, obviously a horrible situation, but I think the bigger issue for a lot of folks is that if you leave an agency and only work for a short time, you don't want to be chasing folks, and it's hard to find them sometimes. So just have them fill out the supervisor form, send it to the state. The state will hold it. It can't come from you. It has to come directly from the supervisor to fill out the form. And then the state will hold it until they have all of them and the rest of your material to process your application from limited to full license.
We have another question in the chat.
Sure.
Question reads, if I apply and receive my limited license by June 30th, I do not need to be registered or scheduled to take the exam, correct? I can now register anytime at this point.
Correct. That is correct. The issue is having that Llmsw issued to you by the 30th of June. And we were unsure about this before we did this. We spoke and I said, I contacted licensing and regulatory affairs and spoke to a representative there and confirmed this before we had this meeting, just because I wanted to make sure we knew that there were questions about this.
And where if a student has a limited license and they do a course that has CEUs, can those CEUs be transferred into once the license is fully licensed?
Good question. The answer is no. You cannot bank hours. When you get your full license, the 45 CEs have to be done between those 3 years, right? So let's say you get your full license May 1st of 2022, and then it'll be renewed 23, 24, 25, to 2025. So the CE that you get have to be between those 3 years. It can't be before. They won't let you bank those.
But would you say that it is good practice to participate in those CE courses, even if you only have a limited license?
Absolutely. Remember, especially for limited license individuals, I mean, ideally, the person you're meeting with will encourage you to do those things, and those are things that will help you to stay on top of the best, what are the best practices, current best practices, what's going on. And those are things that will help you to know. And I will say this about the exam. And if we have a minute, I have a few slides. I'll talk about those. The Association of Social Work Boards hires individuals to create exam questions. And the way that they have a very involved process for how they want those exam questions to be written. And they require individuals to demonstrate that the question is based on evidence and research, both in terms of what the answer is and the options. So if you are staying on top of things and are reading about current practices and best practices, you're going to be in a position to really appreciate those questions. And that should happen both in your supervisory session and, if you're a member of NASW or other organizations, there's a lot of reading that you can do, and attending conferences is another way to really understand and appreciate what is happening in the social work community, and what are the new trends, and what does research say about CBT or psychodynamic or using a particular approach. And the questions come out of that kind of research, because the people who are writing them have to do research when they're writing their questions, and it goes through a very involved process before questions are tested and approved for inclusion in the exam. So absolutely.
Thank you. This next question, Lawrence might be able to answer. The question says, the application says list the name of the education program. Would that be Master of Social Work or School of Social Work?
But you're muted.
Muted.
I'm thinking, let me look at the application. It's gonna take a second, actually.
What's the question, Jeffrey?
So on the application, it says name of education program, and Mary is saying, should it be Master of Social Work or School of Social Work? Like, should she say
It should be like
Master-
Wayne State University, because everybody has to, and remember, in order for you to be eligible for this license, you have to have a BSW or an MSW, depending on the license you're applying for, from a CSW accredited school. So everyone is applying, has a MSW or a BSW, depending on the program you're applying for. Only those that are accredited by the Council on Social Work Education are approved by Lara as eligible to apply for the license. That's one of the requirements. You have to have a CSWE accredited school as the school that you got your degree from to be eligible to apply for this license.
Yes. And on the application, I see that it says name of school, and then right next to it on the right, you'll see it says name of degree. So you can put Masters of Social Work there.
Right. Lawrence, where did you go to get the criminal background check? I know that has come up before. Did you do it with the state police?
No, I just got fingerprinted at a random
Police?
place that they provided. They
Okay.
provided me with some links.
And that's a fee. I can't remember what that fee is, like $60 or $70.
I did it
Something like
I did
that.
it a year and a half ago.
Yeah, there's a fee for that too. I should have wrote that down. So you're paying a fee for the application, the fee for the background check. There is no fee for the transcript to be sent from Wayne State. You're allowed a certain number each year. But it's
Also with
important
the background and fingerprinting check, you want to call the office or the agency before you go, because they have been limiting their access and their hours of operation. So check that before you go.
Right. Good.
Also,
I have a question. I'm sorry. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I was just reading from the chat.
Go ahead, Aggie.
So my question is, okay, if you are a CPO holder, and I know that's completely different from social work, but you have to have fingerprinting. Is it a situation where they'll use those same fingerprints, or you still have to go and get fingerprinted, or do you go through the same place? Can we?
Yeah, that's a good question. I want to say, and certainly we can ask, but because there's an issue of time, right? Say you did that last year. Lara wants a current one because things could have happened in the last year. So that's one reason they usually ask for a current one. And then the other reason I've heard them say is that they use a specific vendors, and they want that information to be sent so that, because they have a particular database where they get all this information so that they can make it easier for them to process the application. And if you've done it more than a year, just like agencies that will say, we want a current one, we can't base it on one that was older. So most likely,
Okay.
most of us will have to apply for a current one. But
Okay,
good
and then
question.
once we submit that, they'll send us the links or the vendors to use for the fingerprinting.
Right,
Okay,
Lawrence? It
perfect.
sounded like once you submit your application, you'll be given links that you can use to, and they do several,
Yeah.
it's not just one.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. Jeffrey, you said there were other questions. Feel free to.
One question was, is there an exam for Llbsw? There are no exams for the limited license, just for the full license.
I'll tell you, there has been some question about changing our dean is really interested in, and we've been talking to Lara. So there has been some discussion about changing how this looks. There are some states, like Ohio does require an exam for the equivalent of what we call a limited license. They call it something else. Michigan doesn't require it. But if you move to another state, and I didn't talk about this, they may require it. I will say that if you get your full license in Michigan and have passed the ASWB clinical exam or the advanced generalist, and you move to another state, if that other state requires the same exam, and when I say same, I mean either clinical or advanced generalist. So you want to make sure which license you're applying for. But let's say you get your clinical, the Llmsw in Michigan, and then you move to Florida, and Florida requires the clinical exam that you passed. You would not have to repeat the exam, obviously, since you've already passed it. What you will have to do is to meet the requirements of Florida's application. So you would still fill out their application, pay their fee, send them the material that they require, but they will note that you've passed the exam and you won't have to repeat it. You just have to go through the application process. I've often been asked questions like, is there reciprocity between Michigan and any other jurisdiction? And the answer is no, there is no reciprocity. The exam is certainly one that most jurisdictions require. So once you pass it someplace, ASWB can send your results to another jurisdiction that you apply for, but you have to start from zero in terms of applying, right? You apply, you pay the fee, and those states will ask you for whatever information they need. Any other questions?
Hi, I have a question. So looking at the link that Lawrence had posted, I believe it was Lawrence that posted in the chat for the application. Is this process done through mail or is this an online process?
It's online. They've moved, they've in the last few years, they've done a lot. Everything is online, which is nice. It makes it easier. So you pay with a credit card if you want. In fact, even for once you get your full license, if they audit you, I think they're even having people upload the certificates of attendance to them if you're audited in that case. But yeah, everything is online.
Okay. Is there anywhere that the link can be posted in the chat for the application? If that makes
Sure.
Yeah.
Can one of you guys do that? Lawrence or Jeffrey or?
There was a link that was posted, but it led to like it looks like it just leads directly to the form instead of where you would do it online.
Oh, it actually, the link goes to the application. It's a fillable form.
Mhm.
Okay.
And
I
you
don't
just,
know where to submit it though.
I want to say you don't see a submit button?
No.
I see that it's you can renew your application online, but I don't see where you can actually submit the original application online.
Not the
How
first
did you
time.
do yours, Jeffrey?
Not the
or
first time. I
Lawrence?
had to print off and mail in.
Okay.
Here, let me, I'm going to stop sharing.
When you mail in for the payment type, how did you guys do that? Jeffrey or Lawrence?
They check checks or money order.
Checks and money order. Okay.
Mhm.
We'll double check and
Hey,
see.
Anwar, this is Natalie. I just had to print. It wasn't allowing me to do it by online. So I had to print and complete it, print it, and I'll mail the check.
Okay. So let me do this, and we're gonna we'll share. I have everyone's RSVP for this event. So let me we'll do some checking, and we can send you the PowerPoint, and then I'll clarify, because
Actually, you know what it is, Anwar? After you apply the first time, then you get the messages from the email where you can do it online.
But initially you think it has to be in paper form? Oh.
Because there's no option to submit.
But it lets you fill it out online. It's a fillable form, and then you print it out. Okay. I think they should change it and do it, but that's just my opinion, and I'll suggest that to them.
So my second question would be, once our degrees are certified, do we submit that through mail or do we submit that electronically? Do you guys know that?
No, that one is electronic, because it can't come to you. It has to go from the university to Lara.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Sure. Others?
There is another question in the chat from L. Conley. I am being instructed to get my SST. Is this okay before my Llmsw or LLMSW? The AP is doing fingerprints for $65. You must get paperwork from your employer. That's a resource, you guys.
Okay. So actually, I'll answer your question about the SST. The question would be, do you need the SST? It's sort of the same response I would give a student who's graduating with a bachelor's degree, who's then moving right into the master's program. If your intention is to go to into the master program right away, and you're not going to take a break to work, I would not apply for the Llbsw, because why fill out the form, pay the fee, and then a year later, once you get your master's degree, you'll have to do the LLMSW. So the same with the social services technician. Do you need that? Are you being asked to, if you don't need it, you might as well wait until April or May or June when you apply for your Llbsw, because when you apply for your LLMSW, if you had another license, like either as a tech or as a Llbsw, those they lapse. You no longer need to worry about them, because your LLMSW becomes the higher license, if you will. You wouldn't need the technician or the Llbsw. But some folks have said to me, well, I'm working while I'm in the program, and my employer is asking me to get the technician or the Llbsw. In that case, absolutely, that makes sense. But if you're just doing it to have it without a need for it, then you might want to think about whether that's a good choice for you, because you're doing all the work, paying the fee, and then you'll have to do it again when you get your master's degree. Does that make sense?
I have another question. So for the registering for your license the first time, I know you said that we have to get a background check. Does that background check entail the fingerprint, or is the fingerprint just with Lara? I'm sorry, is the fingerprint just with ASWB when you're doing the exam?
No, the background check is not ASWB. It's the state of Michigan. They're the ones who require it. And I'll let Lawrence did it. So why don't we have him share his experience and how he did that? That might be helpful.
Well, my experience was I completed the application. I received some links to go and get fingerprinted. There was different agencies all across the Detroit area where you could go. And the background check, I believe, was in that same process of me getting fingerprinted. I don't remember sending in any additional information for the background check.
Okay. All right, thank you.
It's Laura that requires it. And the only role ASWB plays is the exam, right? They create the exam, you pay the fee to them, but they will, and they trust that the state of Michigan has done all of that before they tell them that you have an LLMSW. So it's the state's responsibility to make sure that your application, that your fee, that your background, all of that, and your transcript were all sent to them, and they processed it and they issued you the LLMSW. And then, so when ASWB reaches out to them, they said, yep, Lawrence did everything, he's good to go. You can go ahead and give him permission to take the exam.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Yep. Others? So in the last 10 minutes, how about if I just do a really quick, I have like a few slides about the exam, just as a, to be mindful of. Is that all right? Let's see.
So basically our hopes and prayers is that Wayne State processes the transcripts in enough time.
Yeah, I mean, grades are due May 7th to be put in the system. So then it's going to take some time for them to take everyone's grades and upload them to the transcripts.
After your degree is posted. So we then have to check and make sure that students have met all degree requirements. And then we certify your transcript, and that gets sent to records then certifies your degree, and then you're good to go.
And we can do that now, correct? Like apply to get our transcript sent to Laura. Like it'll still get sent like after our degree is posted, correct?
That's a good question. You want to make sure, I don't know if they give you the option to say, don't only send it after my degree is posted on there. Like if you just go on there and say, I want my transcript sent, they'll send them as of whenever, but you want to specify that you don't want them sent until the degree is posted on there.
Okay, thank you.
We have students each year that send transcripts, and then the state says, these don't have your MSW or your BSW on there, and they can't use those. They need to have the degree on there.
Can you post in the chat the exact number to call for us to request the transcripts, just to be clear?
I believe you can access it on academia and send it directly over to the to Laura's email. That's
yes,
what
I did mine for BSW. I did mine online through Academica.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep. All right. Can folks see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So let me I just want to talk a little bit about the exam. Unless there are other, so stop me if you have questions about the application. My intention was, I only have 2 or 3 slides on here. It was just to give you like a quick kind of info. So I wanted to make sure that we spent time answering any questions about the application process. So feel free to put that in the chat, and then Jeffrey, Naila, or Lawrence can interrupt me, no problem. So the Association of Social Work Boards creates the exam. This is obviously the master's, not the bachelor's. There are 170 multiple choice questions. 20 of them are non-scored items. Remember I said that they have item writers that are tasked with writing these exams. They train them and they pay them to come up with questions. So before those questions are actually added to an exam, they're tested. So when you take an exam, 20 of the 170 are now going to be scored. You won't know which ones they are, obviously, but they're a way. So if a lot of people get a question wrong, they pull it and say something's wrong with this question, and then it goes back into the process to be reviewed. So 150 of them that are not practice ones are the ones that you're assessed on, and they are the ones that count towards your final score. And so they're mixed in together. And you know, they say that the exam questions are written at a 10th grade level, not counting the social work jargon and terms that are used. They really focus on critical thinking skills, right? So they say that the questions that they that they have on the exams require problem solving and reasoning ability. They have 3 types of questions on this exam. Some questions are recall questions, so they might be questions that require you to know something about a topic. So it's just knowing that and being able to recall the answer. And then there are application questions where you understand a theory and understand the application of that theory to answer a question. And then the hardest questions tend to be what are called the reasoning questions, where oftentimes they give you like actually, the next slide I'll share that in a second. But the biggest thing I think that many folks tend to struggle with is anxiety, managing anxiety about this exam. It's a high stakes exam, causes a lot of anxiety for many of us. It is cost prohibitive. We don't want to take it more than once. As you can see, $260. If it hasn't gone up, they seem to have that. So important to do all you can to prepare for this exam. And when you graduate with your master's degree, most organizations aren't asking about the exam, and you can't get your full license until you've worked at least 2 years. Agencies aren't going to ask if you've taken the exam. What they want to know is if you're licensed or not. So many positions you apply for will say they will accept Llbsw or Llbsw. And then some will say Llmsw, but obviously, even if you pass this exam now, you can't get your Llmsw until you have your 2 years post-degree experience. So it's important to keep that in mind as well. These are the questions that I mentioned. So level 1 is the recall. Again, this is a description or definition without application to a given situation. It requires that you remember previously learned content so that you can answer questions. Level 2 is the application I talked about. These questions use information in a very straightforward, specific setting. So again, ability to use, not sue, I see. Learn material. So ability to use learned material in new and concrete situations. These can include application of like rules or methods or concepts, principles, laws, or theories. For example, you might get asked a question about the mandated reporter law and being asked a question about that. So you have to really know that to be able to answer a question. And then that third one is the one that's most difficult. Oftentimes, these are the questions where they give you like a scenario, and you have to really read the scenario and understand what they're asking. And then they'll ask you a question about that scenario. And oftentimes they'll say, okay, here's a situation. What's the first thing you should do? And they'll have 4 answers, and the answers can all be correct. The question is asking, what is the first thing you should do? And that's the key that you have to kind of be thinking about. So what I always say to students is, this is the kind of exam that really requires that you understand that these questions are based in research. So sometimes I've had people come back and say, they had this question on the exam and I didn't agree with the answer because that's not what I do where I work. And my response was, when you look at this exam and when you prepare for it, you're not preparing for it based on what you did at agency X where you worked. It's based on what research says is the best way to respond to situation. That's why it's really important to stay on top of things. We've been saying, go to CE, meet with your supervisor. Because if, going back to that example about mandated reporter, the person said to me, well, in the situation they described in the question would be one that, my supervisor would say, don't file a 3200, a child abuse and neglect report. But best practices and research would say, yes, you're supposed to. And so you really have to be mindful of that when you're reading these, and why it's important to have conversations to really strengthen your critical thinking skills to prepare for this kind of an exam. So, we've talked about this, right? I mean, we have to all be responsible for our license. We have to be mindful of the rules, the laws, and the expectations. You really have to know what your role is and the interplay between what you do and the role that you have, and think about your capacity. Some of us learn differently in different ways. If anxiety is a big thing for you, then think about what you're going to do to help you deal with that so that you don't end up putting yourself in a position where you've really prepared, but you haven't thought about and I'll be the first. I hate standardized exams. They make me anxious. My heart rate goes up. And then when I get that way, I'm using all my energy being anxious and I can't focus on the exam. So I really have to work on that so that I can learn ways to calm myself so I can really listen to the question and understand it rather than worrying about my heart rate going up and feeling warm and not being able to focus on the question. And that, I think Jeffrey's question is to this last point, right? We have to have a commitment to professional development, whether you have your full license or not. So, and being connected with Wayne will give you access to some of these free. You don't have to pay for all CE. I mean, a lot of them do require paying for, but there's also a lot out there that are offered free. So use those, keep an eye out. And take advantage of those, engage in conversation. That's where you really improve your knowledge, your skills, and your abilities that will help you to be in the best place to successfully pass this exam that I know many of us have anxiety about. All right, so that is my PowerPoint, and it's 1:02. I know folks might need to leave and some folks did, but I'll stop. We can share this and we can stick around a little bit to answer any additional questions.
Anwar, is the practice test option going to be shared?
Oh, thank you, Jeffrey. Yeah, so, some of you know that we had the practice exam in our lab and we haven't been able to get in there because of COVID. But one of the things that our dean has done, we have worked with that agency that created the practice, and I will say this too, there are a lot of practice exams out there and many people charging lots of money. So we have contracted with it's Social Work Examination Services, and we purchased, I forget, several hundred licenses, and we are preparing to make those available for alums at a really small cost. I don't know what it's going to be, but it's the usual cost for that, I think, is like $80 or $90 for that exam. But I don't want to give a number because I don't want to be wrong, but it's really low. I'm going to say maybe $15, $20, but don't quote me because it could be a little bit different. So you'll be able to purchase access to that. Once we open, we may be able to have the one that's in the lab, folks can come in and take that. But the one that we're trying to get access to, you'll be able to get like a link so you can do it on your own, and you'll have a certain amount of time. I want to say maybe 30 days or 60 days. All of that will be spelled out. We'll make sure that it gets sent out to all of you so that if you want to participate, access that, you can certainly do that. There are agency organizations out there that that will sell these, and so I would just say do your due diligence before you pay money to purchase these, because there's a lot out there. Others?
Say that we take the exam and we do not pass. Is there a period between how long you can take the exam again after that?
Lawrence, I want to say my memory is 30 days. Am I right?
I believe it's 3 months.
Oh, you're right. It is 3 months. Yeah.
3 months. Yes.
So they do make you wait before you can retake it.
You can file an appeal, though. You can appeal that and try to take it sooner. I know some people who have done that before.
And as I recall, when you take it, if you don't pass, you'll get a summary of what area you didn't pass. And that some people use that as a way to help them focus on areas to prep. Others? All right. I think hopefully that was helpful for folks. As I said earlier, we have other events this week, and they were that email that went out provided you information to events. Lawrence or Jeffrey or Naila, I can't remember which one is tomorrow. I know we have a resume writing, but if you want to share that.
Career service tomorrow.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Oh,
career service. Go ahead, Lawrence.
Tuesday, March 9th from 12 noon to 2 p.m. Finding opportunities in the virtual job market. Career Services is coming over to show specifically how to find opportunities in the social work sphere in the job market. So definitely come and ask as many questions as possible and get the knowledge and information that you could use to search for jobs, and create a strategy for getting employment after graduation, or even starting right now, actually. And then also on Wednesday, March 10th, we at 12 noon, we have the resume building for social workers. Okay, and then Thursday, we have on March 11th, we have a job talk by the Michigan Department of Human Services at 12 noon. And on Friday, we have two more job talks. One is at 12, and that's going to be Sinai Grace Hospital. And then at 1 o'clock, we'll have Hutzel Harper and Detroit Receiving Hospital coming in doing job talks, letting you know about their positions that are open.
Cool. I was just peeking through the chat, and someone asked, can you share with us 3 best resources to use when studying for the exam? And I think you'll get different responses asking different people. And I will share, last June, we did a panel presentation with 3 of our alums who had taken the exam, and we recorded it, and they each shared what worked for them. And so that is on our website, and that may be something you want to take a look at, because it has the PowerPoint, and each of them talked about what they use and what helped them. One person had taken it more than once, and she shared how it worked for her. So that may be something that some of you may want to look at.
On the ASWB exam website, they have resources as well. Some of the materials that I used were the Pocket Prep app, doing a few questions every day. And I also used the Therapist Development Center. And I've also heard good reports about an organization named Passit Pro. And they actually partner with NASW right now to prepare people for the exam. We can send out some links to these materials afterwards, to everybody that RSVP for this event.
And we might be repeating that panel sometime in June, right? Or May, we haven't decided. And we're going to ask Lawrence to be on that panel, since he just recently completed the exam. So we're looking at that possibility. But for now, I think you'll find that to be helpful. And you'll see that depending on the person, right? Each person has figured out their own way of learning and what has worked for them and what hasn't worked. So I don't think there's an answer that works for all, as is usually the case with things. All right, I have a meeting with the dean in a little bit, so I'm gonna prep for that, and I'll tell her how this went. Feel free to reach out to any of us if we can answer any questions. And we thank you for being here today. Have a great day, everyone.